Welcome into the Thunder Basketball Universe, presented by Coop Ale Works. We're back in the studio, and a lot has happened since our last podcast. I feel like I kind of say that a lot because, things do happen in the NBA. It's an 82-game season. A lot of stuff is going to happen, but this actually, a lot of stuff happened over the past 7 days.
Yeah. Long road trip, which, Paris, you are going to recount for us and give us the play-by-play of what exactly happened between Charlotte and Cleveland and why you arrived at 8 o'clock in the morning. And then the Thunder came back home and is starting a 3-game homestand that is going to span about a week's time. And so really sort of the opposite trend. We get to be in our houses and everything, it will be just copacetic for a little while, hopefully.
Yes, I'm going to go ahead and just let you know what happened on this road trip because a lot of our stats and quotes are going to come from what happened during that 7-day span on the road. So this is the Thunder's longest road trip of the season. They started in Dallas, went to San Antonio, and then wrapped things up with an Eastern Conference back-to-back in Charlotte and then in Cleveland. And Gallo, I know you were not there for the back-to-back portion of that. You missed a good one. You missed a fun one.
The last time we podcasted was in San Antonio with Jeremiah Robinson Earl, and he was talking to us at the practice before the game on Wednesday, I believe that was. And so you all then flew to Charlotte. You played the Hornets on Friday night.
Yes.
And then you had to get to Cleveland by Saturday.
Yes.
Usually no big deal.
Usually, and I didn't pack an extra pair of shoes to change to on the plane because I was like, it's going to be a quick flight. We're going to get to the hotel. It'll be easy peasy. Except it started snowing in Charlotte that night, which, Charlotte is not, you grew up in North Carolina. Yeah. That doesn't happen often.
Yeah, we're not we don't have the snow plows at the ready in North Carolina. It's a very rare occasion that if they get snow, it's enough to do much to the roads or, make much of an issue. But we did have school closed because they thought it was going to snow and they thought it was cold. If that gives you any insight into maybe the preparedness.
There you go. So this is the mindset for all of Charlotte when we're leaving the arena. We're leaving Spectrum Center at around, I want to say 10:30, something like that after the game. Snow is on the ground, and our bus is driving pretty slow, driving carefully, trying to get to the airport. And we're almost there. We're almost at the airport, and the bus has to stop because there are 2 cars that are stuck in the snow in the way. And so we're stopped there for a second, and the next thing you know, all of the staff members on the bus get up, walk out the bus, and go help push these cars and move them out of the way. Wilson got into a car and helped drive it in the right direction. And so once those cars,
our equipment manager who's does an incredible job of making sure the guys have everything that they need. They make sure that we have all the balls and the equipment and the uniforms and everything. And so obviously jack of all trades and getting in there and maneuvering a car, no big deal.
I would trust him to drive my car too. Yeah, absolutely. And then once the cars were cleared off the road, the same staffers got behind the bus and helped push the bus, which sounds like a lot, but it was really, she just had to put some gas in there and then a little bit of some oomph behind there. And you had, our strength coaches back there too. So no problem getting the bus moving, but we did arrive to the airport pretty late at that point.
A lot of muscle on those rear tires there for that
yes.
bus.
And so once we got to the airport, obviously Charlotte, again, not really equipped for heavy snow, getting things done super, super fast in the snow. So it took us a while to de-ice the plane. That took about an hour and a half. And then there was a mechanical issue. And so we had to wait. And next thing you know, we're changing planes at 5:30 in the morning. So by the time we arrive in Cleveland, it's 8 a.m. And when we get to the hotel, open up the doors, people in the restaurant are eating breakfast.
But you and Michael Cage, you knocked out the game day report for our at OKC Thunder social channels and OKCThunder.com. You got a couple hours of sleep and then knocked out all your game prep.
Yep. Shout out to blackout curtains. Those came in really clutch on this road trip.
Well, you all survived it. Thank you for holding down the fort while I was gone for those 2 games. It was wonderful to be back with you all back in Paycom Center as the Thunder took on the Chicago Bulls, and now they've got Indiana Pacers coming up on Friday.
Yep. And so with all of that context in mind, how about we go into, you can say that again.
Okay. Well, I think this may be a little obvious for me. While, of course, I watched the games in Charlotte and Cleveland, I was not there. So my Name That Dude came from the game against Chicago.
Okay.
12 points in 12 minutes with 5 assists and 0 turnovers.
12. Oh, okay. 12 points in 12 minutes. Is this the whole game?
It is not the whole game.
Okay. Shai in which quarter? Fourth quarter.
Third quarter.
Dang
yeah,
it,
we've been talking about Shai's third quarters this season, and that was the 12th time actually in 42 games that he's scored in double figures in the third quarter.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty impressive that he's been able to rack up that many double-digit third quarters over the course of this halfway through the season, basically, that we've had so far. And Shai, as always, is a catalyst for this team.
Right.
And it was really in that third quarter when the Thunder started chipping away at that 28-point deficit. It would have been the largest comeback in team history if the Thunder had been able to pull off that comeback. Came up 1 point short against the Bulls thanks to a Mike Muscala three-pointer at the buzzer. But it was a 111-110 loss to Chicago. And a lot of that was really sparked by Shai's ball handling, playmaking, getting downhill, and then efficiency. You know, you're scoring 12 points in 12 minutes, and you're dishing out 5 assists with 0 turnovers. That is how on the offensive end you're able to get back into a game.
Finished the game with 31 points, and in this game, he scored his 4,000th career point, which is a significant milestone because the game before that, he secured his 1,000th career rebound. So now he is only one of 2 members of the 2018 draft class to have 4,000 points and 1,000 rebounds.
Yeah, I mean, that 2018 draft class has been heralded since their arrival in the league. A lot of big names, great players that are emerging from that class. So should be no surprise that Shai is in that category, but it should be something to kind of raise your eyebrows that he is only one of 2 guys to accomplish that so far. And it speaks to, even though he missed a bunch of games last year, he's been effective, he's been productive, he's been efficient. And if you're just looking at the experience that he's racked up and as you project out this team into the future, to have a guy who has already accumulated so much in his young career and has had to do that while being at the helm, while being the focal point of opposing teams' defenses, it's really impressive.
The other element to Shai's game that I love, especially at this juncture, he also had 3 steals in this game.
Yeah.
So he's got a nice streak of game. I believe it's 9 games now where he has at least 1 or more steals. Might have to fact check me on that. I'm losing my my train of thought on that one. But
stand by.
Okay.
Stand by.
While Gallo's going on that, I'll explain this to you. So this has kind of been a subtle, small area of growth for Shai, especially over this season. You know, previous seasons when the team had really strong defenders at pretty much all 4 other positions, Shai was normally guarding that 5th player on the opposing team. And so as a help defender, you know, that's an area that he learned that he could really grow. But this season, you know, with, you know, other players, younger players in that starting lineup, Shai's had to kind of guard up a little bit and take on some tougher challenges and some tougher assignments. And he stepped up to the challenge, and he's starting to put together these like numbers that back that up, especially in the steal column and the block column.
Right. It's 10 straight games with a steal. So
okay, I was close.
You were very close. And that puts him 3rd actually among all players in terms of active streaks right now in the league. And so great for him to be on that leaderboard. You mentioned the block shots just a second ago. He's got 33 blocks already in 42 games. That's nearly 1 a game. And if you combine his steals and blocks, that's nearly 2 steals and blocks combined per game.
Right.
So Shai told us very early on in his career, in order to be the type of player that he wants to be and he knows he can be, he's got to do it on the defensive end. That is not an area where he's looking to like shirk responsibility or to take a breather and take a breath. He knows that he's got to build up the endurance and the stamina to be able to do both of those things for 36, 38 minutes, however long he's on a court. And we're seeing him do that with more and more consistency.
And it starts with being able to do things that don't show up on the stat sheet.
Yeah.
I can't remember how many. I think it was in the Dallas game, but he just had a couple of those just deflections on the help side. Didn't result in anything on this box score other than the ball went out of bounds.
Right.
But Shai was there, and he was like playing over top of the, you know, of the post player. I forget who it was, but he was always there and got a hand on it.
Yeah.
Those sort of plays don't show up, but your commitment to that and your execution on those things lead to things that do show up on the stat sheet and that can turn games, the steals, the blocks, the secured rebounds. Those are the sort of things that we see Shai continually building and stacking on. And it's really cool to see when they show up in the stat sheet.
The play that stands out to me, and it was not from this recent stretch, but it was to end the third, while we're talking about Shai's third quarters, it was to end the third quarter against the New York Knicks on New Year's Eve. And the Knicks had the ball out top, clock's winding down, and Shea's kind of out top, like clapping his hands, realizing it's a one-on-one defensive moment for him. He's got to get a stop. And he sat down, he dug in, and he forced a missed shot that was very contested and had no real chance of going in. And he went off to the sideline. Just he was so proud of that moment, but not surprised.
Yeah.
And I think that was very telling to me, just in terms of like where his head is at, his mindset is at. And that was a game that the Thunder held New York to just 80 points in that game.
He's a competitor.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if you're a competitor and you want to be on the floor, you recognize the value of those possessions and you recognize how important those can be in changing momentum of games, winning games. So no surprise that Shea is taking a lot of pride in those.
All right, Paris, hit us with your
All right, my name that dude. 12 points, 4 rebounds, 5 of 8 from the field. And I might have put you at a disadvantage here because you weren't here for this game. But you might get it.
This sounds like Mike Muscala's stat line.
You're so close. You're so close.
Ty Jerome?
Other direction, in more of a veteran direction.
Kenrich Williams?
Yes.
Okay,
Kenrich Williams. This was Kenrich against Cleveland. And I wanted to point this out because, obviously, Kenrich Williams, Kenny Hustle, we talk about him all the time. There's not much that you can't say about him. But this stretch in particular, this was the second game back after missing 5 games due to health and safety protocols. First of all, you've missed 5 games, and it was about a 10-day stretch. Yeah. So I imagine you're probably a little tired. I mean, of all people, Kenrich probably never runs out of energy. But still, that's worth mentioning. This is the second night of a back-to-back. Not just the second night of a back-to-back. It's the second night of this back-to-back. The one that I just told you the team was pushing, the coaching staff was pushing the bus, the night before. This is this game that they played. And Kenrich Williams brought the energy, he brought hustle, intensity, and was really a valuable spark to a tired team who was in the midst of some really, unique circumstances, unpredictable uncontrollables. And the team went out there and competed, and they competed hard, and Kenrich played a really big role in that.
He just said, basically, I missed the competition. That was the biggest thing, being away. He couldn't do too much working out. He tried to do a little bit on his own. He, watched games. He tried to stay engaged, but what was eating at him was not having that outlet to be able to just go out and leave it all on the line. So I'm glad that you picked that stat line because he's a guy that we have to talk about every single. I feel like every single time that we come together in podcasts, like he is a topic of conversation because he is always up to stuff. And it reminds me of back during the preseason when he missed time, and watching those preseason games, you and I were talking about like. It just feels like there's something missing out there when Kenrich wasn't on the floor. And we talked to Mark Daigneault about that it was going to be a good opportunity to see what this team is like without that veteran presence, to see how that they react. And there's been a few instances this season when Kenrich has not played, namely that Memphis game, the first Memphis game on the road, that the Thunder really had to learn from that experience of not having him. But recently, they've been able to perform a bit better without him, but it's such a clear representation of what he is and who he is when he comes back.
And the crazy part about this is that it's not always going to show up in the stat line. Like I picked his really good stat line against Cleveland where he had 12 points and he was shooting really efficient, like 62% from the field. But in the Chicago game, he had 6 points and he was only 2 for 10. And yet still in that game, I was like, man, Kenrich is out there going hard. And he's making a really big impact on this game. And it speaks to what he brings when he steps onto the floor, even when he's off the floor. He's just a stabilizing presence. He is just a cool, calm, collected, but super competitive and like super energizing presence when he's out there on the floor. Because even though it might not show up on the stat sheet, diving on the floor for loose balls, getting a hand on an offensive rebound just to tip it out, getting a deflection, and then somebody else picks up the steal. Those are the things, those are the margins that Kenrich is just always seems to be around the right play, even if he doesn't get the stat.
And a lot of times you see these types of players, the hustle guys, and they're not very efficient, on the offensive end. And so the reason that they're on the floor is all of this great hustle stuff, but there are certain moments of the game that they can't be on the floor.
Right.
Kenrich Williams has completely disrupted any potential for that narrative over the last 2 seasons. Shot 44% from 3 last year, in the high 30s, like 38, 39% this year, and shooting 46% from the field overall. So when you combine all of that gritty stuff and you're still like a functional like plus efficiency offensive player, that's huge for your value for a team.
And Aaron Wiggins summed it up perfectly after the Cleveland game. He was asked about Kenrich, and he just goes, I love Kenrich, man. I just love Kenrich, man. And it's because when you compete at that level and you compete that hard, it's selfless.
Right.
It really is, because recognizing that if I run hard, I might not get the ball, but it might open something else for somebody else. That's where Kenrich is at. That's where his mindset is at. And he's always just positive, smiling, has a smile on his face, always seems to be talking to somebody on the bench or walking to the bench or walking off the floors. He's in somebody's ear. And so he's built a really, really positive reputation in that locker room.
It's interesting you use the word selfless, because it reminded me of something Ty Jerome told us, I think before the San Antonio game. He said, Kenrich is selfless and all he wants to do is win. Yeah. And you see that when he comes back to the bench. You see that when he comes back to the locker room. Like, he means what he says, is what Ty Jerome told us. And like, I know that sounds normal, but it's not always the easiest thing to do when careers are on the line, when, you know, there's money at stake. There's, the NBA is a business, and it's for big boys and big girls. You know, it's like it's not for the faint of heart. But when you have a guy that is about the right things and is really real, that is a huge, huge factor. And that's why Ty Jerome says, like, you feel better when he's on the floor.
Mark Daigneault even put it even stranger. He was like, there isn't a bone in Kenrich's body that isn't exactly who he is. Yeah.
I don't know how that would be. I mean, so like, no transplants for Kenrich Williams.
Just basically the model of integrity and competitiveness. That is Kenrich Williams. And so had to bring up that stat line for Kenny Hustle.
I got to jump in here and say that I think I messed things up earlier when I jumped in to name that dude instead of you can say that again.
We got to keep everybody on their toes, you know?
Just you missed 2 games in this business and you're all out of whack and out of sorts. And we haven't podcasted in a week, so my apologies for all our listeners.
How about we go into you can say that again?
That sounds lovely.
Okay, cool.
Here's my quote. That was good that Coach went to that. I feel like it was easy for us to switch everything. I felt like it kind of helped that they were confused and didn't know it was coming. We just did a good job scrambling and finding the open guy.
Okay, so I know what topic this is about. The Thunder went to a small closing lineup against Chicago, one that we haven't really seen this season.
I don't think any minutes on the floor for that group.
Okay, yeah. Lou?
It was Lou Dort, yes.
Nice.
And I picked this because you and I talked about this right after the press conference post-game on Monday. Yeah. Which was that it was kind of a moment of clarity of realizing how much Lou has grown and matured over the course of his last 3 years in the NBA, that his ability to talk about the game, to articulate some of the finer points and the details, and just to, I don't know, just the level of confidence that he has to dissect what's happening out there on the floor, I just thought was really cool. And the way that he talked about the pressure defense that the Thunder was putting out there, that Mark Daigneault, put this small lineup out on the floor, and that, when you're small like that, you can't let teams just walk the ball up the court and, send the ball into Nikola Vucevic in the post and, get their offense rolling with Zach LaVine and pick and roll and all that stuff. Like, you've got to pressure, you've got to make guys uncomfortable. Ayo Dosunmu, ended up fouling out because of that game. Because of that strategy, and it was because Lou was pressuring full court. He rushed him into this play where he's running the ball up the floor right into Kenrich Williams, who took a charge. So, like, having Lou explain all of that was really cool to me.
And just to go back to this point about how much Lou has grown, obviously we all remember his rookie season. Just a bowling ball, fire hydrant, just a physical specimen of defensive pressure. Like, he could keep anybody in front of him. He had all of the physical attributes. The room for growth for Lou was combining the physical ability with the mental preparation and the IQ of anticipating some things so that you don't pick up some, quick fouls early on throughout the game. Yeah. And I mean, he was pretty foul prone because he was playing against these high usage, high volume players. Right. And so it was important for him to, if I know that he's going to go left, maybe I shade a little bit more this side. And so I anticipate some of these plays a little bit early on. And I think we're seeing some of that play out and how he's able to strategize and realize how strategies play out at the end of games. And it's so, I remember we were sitting there just talking about it, like, wow, That was so well put.
Yeah, I mean, he continues to impress. He's still doing those dirty work things that we've seen. He's still racked up a ton of those offensive fouls that he draws, and that's going to be a part of his game, no matter who he is, where he is, what he's doing. But as you're saying, he's following that up by being in the right spot more, being in help side defense more. Remember, he was so hard on himself a few games ago about. He missed a rotation at the end of the game, and it wasn't one that made this massive difference in the final score or final outcome. But he's now that he understands the league more, he's recognizing even more areas where he can improve.
Yeah,
and the key is for him to maintain that id on the floor. That ability to just live in the moment and breathe fire and be at 100 miles an hour at all times, as Mark Daigneault says. Combine that with the thinking and the study and the preparation beforehand and the recognition of situations. And I think we're seeing that more and more.
I want to take this and put it directly into that the closing lineup in that Chicago game, because the thing that stuck out to me the most, and you talked about it, was just the unreal defensive pressure that just turned up. I mean, the Thunder cranked it up big time in the final 6 minutes of that game against Chicago. And you had, Kenrich Williams forcing an 8-second count / backcourt violation / timeout. It was a weird situation.
Confusing play.
Yeah, but a turnover.
Yeah.
And then obviously Lou Dort fouling out Ayo. Those are big plays. You had Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He had a big time block on
Vucevic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Those were plays that were just happening consecutively for the Thunder, and it was so cool to see, especially when that small lineup, that edge, that just fight, that dog mentality really come out big time.
Yeah, and Paris, you were on the verge of seeing playoff basketball in Oklahoma City before the whole world shut down. And we're only 18 months or so removed from the Thunder being in the playoffs, but we're seeing that as fans have come back to Paycom Center this season, and the team has given them more and more of these great comebacks and these thrilling performances. You think of the Shai buzzer beater against the Clippers and some of these other moments. That fourth quarter against the Bulls was really tapping into that Paycom Center electricity,
100%.
And you could sense that it was this symbiotic relationship where the team would do something great, the fans would get even more hyped up, and that would build the momentum, and that's what separates some really good teams to great teams and organizations, when they have this ball rolling downhill feeling that they can get when their home court advantage really kicks in.
My favorite thing, because you and I are both, we bump up right to the crowd on press row. And so my favorite thing is when the crowd can sense that something's afoot. Okay, something's about to happen here. There's a moment where everybody just starts standing up.
Yeah.
And I love that so much, because it just adds some extra juice and some extra energy. And that was when the Thunder started getting that roll and brought it down to 1 point within that final minute. It was a crazy, crazy feeling and atmosphere inside of Paycom Center.
Just another sort of inside basketball thing. When I go over to get ready to do a walk-off interview, it's usually about with a minute left if the game is, if the Thunder has got the game in hand, or it's a one-possession game. I'll usually go over and stand in the corner and get ready, right next to the Thunder bench, and get ready to walk on the floor to do that walk-off interview for Bally Sports Oklahoma. I can't tell you the number of times this season when it's gotten to about the 1 minute mark, and the game's margin has been so wide that it's kind of all right, it's not really time to go over to the corner yet. And 10 seconds later, I'm sprinting to the corner to try to get in position to do this walk-off interview. Because, normally I've got to be at my seat. I'm taking notes. I'm getting ready. I'm, might have a late hit on the broadcast. And that game against Chicago was another one of those where myself, Matt Tumbleson, John Reed, who are our PR guys who come over and help coordinate post-game interviews, we all jumped up in a flash to get over to that corner real quick.
I remember it. Yeah, things change quickly. And here's the other thing that I talked to you about after the game as well. What is it about Chicago playing in Oklahoma City? This is the third straight game where the Thunder has battled its way back in Oklahoma City from down 20-plus points. Over the past 2 years. 2 years inside of Paycom Center against the Bulls. The last two resulted in historic wins for the Thunder, historic comeback wins. 26 was the first one. That was in 2019.
And then
22. Last season. And this year, battled back from 28 down and almost pulled off another historic win. I don't know what it is about Chicago and Oklahoma City, but that was fun to watch.
Really one defensive stop away. If you remember, late in that game, inside of 10 seconds, Lou was pressuring Zach LaVine down to the baseline.
Yeah.
And LaVine's momentum was going way too fast. And he didn't really have a plan once he got to the baseline. He was just trying to evade. And it was one of those moments where I think the refs thought that Lou was going to try to take a foul, and Lou was kind of pressuring, and he's sort of like half jabbed. And, you know, you just think of the what ifs in that scenario. If LaVine doesn't go to the line and hit both of those free throws, there's a turnover, the Thunder gets the ball back. You know, that's one of those precious moments that if the Thunder had just put themselves in a little bit better of a position in the first half of that game, you know, it's not coming down to this, are they trying to foul? Are they not trying to foul moment late in the game?
Yeah, and I mean, that's the sentiment that all of the Thunder players and Coach Daigneault even, it's like, we're great at comebacks. We are a resilient team. We know how to shake things off and get ourselves back to 0-0. The next step is not getting down and building up this hole that we have to climb out of in the first place. So a lot of area of growth for the Thunder, but a big sign of resilience and truly a fun game to watch. I mean, that's a Monday night in Paycom Center. Yeah.
And, you know, these are the types of habits of never say die, never out of a game that they have to be building now, because you might get down big in a playoff game down in the future. You might get down big in a series.
Yeah.
You think back to some of this Thunder history, and, you know, in 2012, they're down 2-0 in a series to San Antonio, and they come back and rip off 4 straight wins.
Right.
In 2016, they lost by 30 to San Antonio in game 1.
Right.
I believe the Western Conference semis. And then they come back and they win a tight game in game 2 at San Antonio. You know, being able to shake that off and not give in to the momentum is a huge thing.
It's a massive, massive deal. And the Thunder's building really good habits right now. All right. I'm going to go into my you can say that again. I think you're going to get it. I was just kind of trying to bait them into doing something they didn't want to do, and then just be able to do what we call a moment of truth.
Yeah. So we've heard the term moment of truth thrown around a bunch this season. Theo Maledon mentioned it. Darius Baisley has mentioned it multiple times, and he's usually the one that is doing these moment of truth blocks. But this was Jeremiah Robinson Earl.
Yep. And you know it when you see it. I'll put it that way. Yeah. Like, it is not this little subtle thing that they go back and have to watch film and be like, hey, look, that was a moment of truth. No. This is something that rolls through NBA highlights on Twitter, something that...
The whole arena stands still for a second and is like, whoa.
Okay, so Jeremiah Robinson Earl, I think it was like a 3-on-1 fast break situation. Chicago's rolling downhill, and they have the numbers. They have the advantage. Jeremiah Robinson Earl... great footwork, great IQ, and great just intensity and competitiveness in this moment.
Troy Brown.
Thank you. Okay, Troy Brown elevates for what could have been a poster of a dunk.
Yeah, would have been real nice.
I mean, he was getting up there. He was high above the rim, and he was going up there with confidence. Jeremiah Robinson Earl elevates with the exact same confidence, meets him at the top of his shot, and just meets the ball hand in hand. And Here's what stuns me still today about this block. It wasn't a swat. Nope. He didn't send that thing into the third row. He didn't even just like bat it down. He held on to it all the way down to the ground and took it with him onto the floor. And I feel like everybody just needed a moment to like, whoa, did that really he just like stuffed that block. That's a stuffing of a block.
I would have been less surprised if he had like broken his wrist trying to block that dunk than being able to like curl it down and bring it in. But you know, look, Jeremiah he's a Midwestern guy. He's got that sort of brawn and grit and toughness to him. And he went up. He was not afraid of being on a poster. And that is the biggest thing. You know, there's no business decisions happening in OKC. No. That's the whole purpose behind the moment of truth, that your teammates and you should expect yourself to go up and put your nose in those situations. And, you know, it's going to be amazing when you come out on top like this, but sometimes you're not. And you got to be able to swallow the good with the bad.
I love this block so much because there's a story here, right? This is Jeremiah Robinson-Earl. He's a rookie. He's coming in. He's an undersized 5. He's a stretch 4. Like he's very versatile out there, but oftentimes he's giving up a lot of size at that 5 position. And so he's had to learn how to play with force, play physical, and like set the tone against some of these big guys. And he talks to us all the time about, I talk to Mike, I talk to Fave all the time about, being a rookie and learning the ropes and all of that stuff. One guy who has racked up a lot of moment of truths is Mike Muscala.
Yeah.
A guy who is not scared to go up there and be on a poster, but at least deter a dunk or make something hard for an opponent. Mike Muscala has made a reputation of I'm just willing to go vertical, go nose to nose, and put myself out there. And for a guy like Jeremiah Robinson-Earl to have a moment like this, I think of what it must be like to see a guy like Mike Muscala put himself on the line in those sort of situations every day in practice, every day in games, and now he's got one of these moments. Right. I'm like, I wonder how much that played into this moment.
Well, and not that Jeremiah didn't do these types of things in college or before, but I also wonder how it must feel for a guy like Mike Muscala to like, okay, my guy's growing up. Like, look at what I've been able to pass along in terms of that verticality, in terms of, putting your body on the line and setting that tone. And, for the next generation of Thunder players, these are important habits to be forming.
Yep. And I'll remind everybody that this was in the first half of the Chicago game. And, the Thunder was working at a deficit. They were operating at a deficit, and they needed some of these plays. They just needed some momentum plays. That was a massive one. And it was really cool. That's also a play that'll stick with a player too. You have one of those plays that it's like, okay, not only was that a highlight reel play, but that was a really good defensive play. That was strong. And now I know I can do those sort of things.
And it'll stick with fans too. When fans are leaving Paycom Center, yes, the Thunder lost that game, but I don't necessarily think that they're leaving bemoaning that. Right. They're thinking about the incredible comeback. They're thinking about the amazing block that Jeremiah Robinson-Earl had. They're thinking about the slicing layups and driving finishes that Shea had.
Right.
There's entertainment within the game, and I think what the Thunder has shown is like there's more than just the win-loss column and what the final score says.
Absolutely. Well, that wraps up. You can say that again and name that dude, even if we did that in reverse order. No worries. We'll be right back right after this break.
Coop Ale Works is the proud sponsor of Thunder Basketball Universe. Brewers of the fan favorites F5 IPA and 99-calorie Ice Chest IPA. You'll find those and many more Coop beers at retailers across Oklahoma. Learn more at coopaleworks.com.
It is now that point in the podcast where we want to bless your timeline, and boy, did we have one timeline blessing on this road trip that we've got to talk about, and it came from Mamadi Diakite, who celebrated his 25th birthday in the Thunder's game against Charlotte, and that was a great day for Mamadi because not only was it his 25th birthday, but he had just signed his 10-day contract with the Thunder that day.
Yeah, so he had been on a 10-day hardship exception contract because of the guys that were out with health and safety protocols. This is a more traditional 10-day contract that Diakite can sign. I believe he can sign 2 of them with the team. And so this is a great opportunity just to extend that window of time that the Thunder gets to look at him. And also, I think, take into account that he's still coming back from a left hip fracture in the in the preseason. And he's still working his way back in terms of the timing, in terms of those sort of return to play conditioning things. We are seeing the spring, we are seeing the energy, we are seeing the effort. We're just, I think the Thunder is getting the opportunity to see a little bit more of the timing and the cohesion and just like some of the refining stuff that needs to happen. And they're going to have an opportunity to do that here with this 10-day contract. And
Mamadi is just a great, fun presence in this Thunder locker room. You could tell all the guys really enjoy having him around. In that pregame press conference that we had with Mamadi on his birthday, he explained, the rehab process and all of that stuff. And at the end, all the reporters were like, "Happy birthday, Mamadi." Was like, "Happy birthday to me."
Yeah, it's so good.
It's so sweet. so wholesome. And so it was great to see Mamadi do well. He is doing pretty well with the Thunder. He's getting, some solid minutes with the team. And this is an opportunity where the Thunder really gets a chance to feel him out. And because they were excited about him during the preseason process and throughout training camp. He brings kind of a unique skill set around that rim. He's super athletic, is a shot blocker, just always in the mix down there, and can obviously operate above the rim as well. But obviously that hip fracture really set him back. And so the Thunder's really trying to get another look at him. He's still technically kind of on a return to performance kind of, protocol here. Yeah, he's still trying to get back to 100% and back to where he was before he hurt himself. But it was interesting to hear that rehab process for him. That he said it was really a mental battle because it's a hip, right? Like it's not like your shoulder or your elbow where you can still get up and walk around. A lot of his recovery, he had to just sit there and do nothing and sit on the couch and watch Thunder games.
He was so funny about this. First of all, first he was sweet and he said that he thanks God that he's here and that it's great to be back and playing with, a young team and playing with an old teammate in Ty Jerome, who he was with at the University of Virginia. But then he just said, I had to be really patient. And you can just tell from his attitude and his personality that he likes being in the mix. He's an extrovert. We hear him singing on the bus and doing Mamadi things, as Ty Jerome would call it, a Mamadi moment.
Mamadi moment.
Like when he tried to dunk on the entire Cleveland Cavaliers team in Oklahoma City.
Yes.
But he said, I had to watch a lot of movies. I had to watch a lot of games while I was rehabbing. And, I couldn't go out. I couldn't go out to my favorite restaurants like Frida in the Paseo district. I couldn't go out to Broadway 10 and Vast and, some of these places. He's like a foodie and he's enjoying the food scene in Oklahoma City. And he's only been here for a little while, but I'm glad to see him, stretching his wings when he can.
And everybody seems just to be happy for Mamadi. Even Coach Dagnall, just happy for him that he was able to get back to where he was because he was ahead of schedule. As long as that rehab process it was projected to be a little bit longer than what he actually went through. And so that's a credit to Mamadi. Obviously, a huge credit to the Thunder training staff who really helped him. He told me, he was like, I had to stay on top of taking my medicine and making sure I was drinking the right protein and all of this stuff. And so he was really on top of it. And you could tell he really was just excited to get back out there and be with this team.
And there's one other big reason why the Thunder wants to take a look at him. If you look at the other bigs on this roster right now, you've got kind of a short roller in Derek Favors, who is going to kind of hit those elbow areas. He's got that nice little floater. He's a big physical, but ground defender on the other end of the floor. You've got Mike Muscala. He is a pick and pop threat on the offensive end. And on defense, he is kind of more of one of these stand up, be in the right position defenders. And then Jeremiah Robinson Earl, he is kind of this small ball tweener 5-man. And Mark Daigneault talks all the time about how you play at the 5 spot really is a domino effect on how you're going to play throughout the rest of the game and how you're going to play with the other 4 positions. And, that is a really fascinating and dynamic spot on the floor. The one type of big that the Thunder doesn't really have at that spot right now is this above the rim roll man.
Right.
And that is Mamadi Diakite. He is a big time shot blocker in terms of a guy that could play in drop coverage or come over and help side. The way that a lot of teams are deploying their centers right now is kind of hang back at the rim and prevent anything easy at the bucket. He gives the Thunder that as well. So not only are you getting a look at Mamadi as a player and projecting him out in that type of role as a big man and how do you incorporate that style into your team, but it's also how do our core guys like Shea and Josh and Lou and some of these others, how do they play alongside a guy that is providing that type of effect on the floor in comparison to the other 3 types of guys that you have on the floor too? So getting a guy with that skill set, it's not so easy. You can't just say, hey, we've got this guy. So to have him and to be able to deploy him and then collect the data and collect the film off of that is big.
It absolutely is. And the Thunder is really looking forward to kind of keep testing it out with Mamadi and see where he looks throughout his 10-day contract. Gallo, I've got another timeline blessing.
Oh.
It's not on here, but
you're going to surprise me with this. Wow.
I am. Okay. But I think you'll appreciate this. So I feel like it's a really important reminder for Thunder fans to keep an eye on the OKC Blue.
Oh, yeah.
And they have been extremely active. Isaiah Roby, Alexei Pokusevski, Teo Maledon, all down there with the OKC Blue. And one guy who has had a phenomenal couple games is Teo Maledon. And not only just a phenomenal couple shots, he had a buzzer beater against the Texas the Texas Legends, right? Yeah. And he had 26 points in that game, buzzer beater. The team ultimately lost in overtime, but that was one of 2 consecutive 20-plus point performances for Teo. And so I just want to point that out because it's always a good reminder, especially with this young team. The Thunder is really utilizing its G League affiliate to make sure that those minutes stay up and make sure that these guys get reps and get opportunities out there on the floor. And we're seeing guys like Teo Maledon take advantage of that.
Yeah, and these guys have to continue to work on their games, work on their development. You know, they're so young. Teo is 20, 21, and his time in the NBA is still going to be ahead of him at some point.
Right.
We don't know exactly when that will be, but he could factor into a rotation sometime down the line. If it's not this season, could be next season, could be 2 seasons from now, could be, I mean, we just don't know when the Thunder is going to need his type of play and when he's going to have made the gains. Clearly he is improving day by day. If you look at some of the numbers that he's putting up since the G League has restarted here after the new year, it's been eye-popping. The other reason to keep an eye on the Blue is Mark Daigneault has talked about wanting to reward guys when they come back from the Blue with playing time immediately upon returning. Because when they put in the effort, when they put in the work, when they invest with the Blue, they're kind of on a roll. They're like running in hot to these Thunder opportunities. So don't be surprised if when some of these guys come back from the Blue, they're popped in right there and in the rotation.
So basically, if you want to seem like a fortune teller among your friends, you know, anticipating who's going to be in that lineup for the Thunder, keep an eye on that OKC Blue, and you might be able to tell who might be in the rotation for the Thunder in the next game.
No doubt about it.
All right. That's all for today's podcast. But before we let you go, we got to let you know what's on tap for the Thunder. A nice balance here for the Thunder after a nice grueling stretch on the road, 7 days on the road, and then that stretch of 3 games and 4 nights. The Thunder has a rare 3-day break right now. They're in the middle of it, and we don't know what to do with ourselves other than podcasts. So that's where we're at right now.
Unprecedented, unheard of time to have 3 days in a row at home with no games, and then have that bookended with 2 or 3 days, 2 days off on the weekend coming up as well without a game. So the Thunder is going to catch its breath. All those bumps and bruises, hopefully those heal up during this little week stretch, and the Thunder gets back in action on Friday.
Against Indianapolis, that's going to be here inside of Paycom Center at 7 p.m. Tune in on Bally Sports Oklahoma. We will podcast again next week. We've got you covered. But until then, thank you so much for tuning in and watching. Be sure to like, rate, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to check us out on YouTube as well. Thank you so much to our producer, Matt Bishop. And until next time, Thunder up, and catch you later.